Why is Etsy the perfect starting point for an online business in 2025? That's what I will address in this episode of Etsy and E-Comm with the Professional Mom. Hey, welcome back. I am Rebecca Boland, the voice, the person behind the brand, The Professional Mom, and I have started this brand new podcast in 2025, so it is only fitting to jump right into why, even in 2025, Etsy is still one of, if not the best platforms to start an online business. There's a lot of noise out there as to whether people love or hate Etsy. And just like in any realm of anything, really, you're going to get plenty of negative information and negative feedback from people online about selling on Etsy. So I want to make sure to balance that out with another positive voice about Etsy and the opportunity it brings. If you have been even toying with the idea of a side hustle, or if you have been selling at craft shows, or you have just been making some items for fun, you're an artist or just a crafty person, or you collect vintage items anyway, all of these different skill sets and interests have a place on Etsy, and 2025 is no different than early movers in 2016 and prior. Starting on Etsy in early 2020 was a really fun way for me to get a little bit of my craftiness out of my system while I was home more because of the whole COVID pandemic, and making a little bit of that extra side hustle money, which, let's be honest, just kind of paid for my crafting materials at the time. So I took that as just a fun opportunity that kind of paid for itself as a hobby. But since then, it has become this huge opportunity that has opened my eyes to so many different ways to make money online that are all very reasonable, very achievable. Prior to Etsy, even with a corporate background and business understanding, I still had that sense that people making money online were all either kind of young, trendy, hip influencers, or like the Mark Cubans who were super early movers, made a really good play early on and then sold it for 7, 8 more figures later down the road. But that's really not the case. And not everything online is as scammy and spammy and icky feeling as it sometimes can seem like a lot of it is. You just have to know where the opportunities are and how to spot them out. And all of that said, Etsy was the platform that made that possible for me. It made it comfortable, approachable. It takes away a lot of the guesswork and lets you focus on one step of the journey at a time. And all of that really comes together ultimately to say why, if people ask me today, how would you start an online business? What's the first thing you would do? I would 95% of the time say, jump onto Etsy. It is low cost and high opportunity. So there's really no reason not to. So if it's ever even crossed your mind to look into how to start an online business or make passive income online, then give me just a few minutes listening to this episode and let me break it down for you. And hopefully you'll be clearer on the path and motivated to start trying it out for yourself as well. Right off the bat, let's go ahead and quash the Etsy is oversaturated myth. I don't want to hear that term and don't comment on this video just to say it's oversaturated. Look, I have started 5 shops and one of them was just late last year. So one of them is only 3 months old because I wanted to test some theories and I wanted to start something brand new and see what comes of it. 2 of them I had ultimately let kind of fade out. One was on like eternal vacation mode, and one I just wasn't adding enough products to and not paying attention to, and other movers came into this space. But I have kind of revived both of them. So what I want to call out to anybody right from the beginning of this is that, yes, there are a ton of Etsy sellers. So some of the Etsy statistics that are pulling up for 2024, since that's the last full fiscal year we've got, is that they have reported there are over 6.6 million active sellers. So yes, globally, there is a lot of competition and there are a lot of shops. However, every time you hear people complain that it's oversaturated, you have to think on the flip side, 6.6 million sellers, how many buyers is Etsy bringing in? And this report is pulling in active buyers in 2024 was 91.5 million. So there were only 6.6 million active sellers. And suddenly, when you put those numbers side by side, the 6.6 million active sellers doesn't sound huge, does it? You've now got, the math is about 13 or 14 buyers for every one seller. So if you start there and then you backtrack into thinking, well, it says active sellers, but that doesn't mean they are all actively putting new items in their shop. They're not actively promoting their shop. They might only have one or two items that people don't even want. And then there are still hundreds, if not thousands of niches and micro niches that they might not even be competing in the same place. And if they're global sellers, they might be selling in different languages. If they're selling t-shirts, but they're in Germany, they might only have German phrases on their t-shirts, not competing with your potential market. So when you really break it down, there is this vast opportunity. You just have to find the right place to step into it. So aside from the huge opportunity, we quashed the myth right off the bat, but let's just talk about why I love Etsy as a starting point. Okay, Etsy is low barrier to entry. It has a very minimal cost to set up. Now, it did used to be fully free just to open a shop, but I do believe they've moved that to a flat one-time fee just to open shop, which, yes, kind of stinks for a new seller if you didn't want to have to invest that, but it is not a lot in the grand scheme of things. It is not an annual fee. And ultimately, it's a really good thing for sellers because it's keeping kind of fake sellers or spammy sellers from flooding the market. It's kind of keeping out the junk. It's keeping even sellers like me who have 5 shops now. It means when I open a new shop, it's because I have a clear, focused value that I intend to put up on that platform, as opposed to just opening shops nonstop and flooding the market. But compared to setting up other shops, you don't have to pay for a full e-commerce site. There is a lot of opportunity. People talk about Shopify and other platforms, but those require a monthly fee. So especially if you are just learning, you might not be in the position that you want to be shelling out a monthly fee for, 3, 4, 5 months before you know for a fact that your product will sell. Etsy also makes it really easy to get started without fancy tech skills. It's really, hey, jump on, and there might be some pieces to figure out, but ultimately it's your classic, hey, click here to open a shop. What do you want to call the shop? All right, now enter your information. Okay, now start your first product. Fill these out, and it guides you through that process. Then once you have a shop, the next great thing is you have this built-in audience. You are not paying for marketing, because that's part of what Etsy pays for. That's part of the benefits. Honestly, it's probably part of why they are charging a small opening fee now. But they are bringing millions of active buyers who are looking for exactly the type of product that you'll be selling. They are pulling in buyers that are not wanting to go to the local Target, Walmart, Macy's, and find something mass produced. And I'm not in the digital marketing world. I never have been, or maybe this would have been easier for me to jump into, but I'm sure if we find somebody and maybe we can have a guest on the show one day, talk to us. But that traffic is priceless, especially if you don't know what you're doing. You would spend a lot more money on trying to learn your own Facebook ads and driving traffic to your products and hoping that you convert into a sale. Whereas Etsy is sitting there saying, hey, we have exactly the buyer to match with the perfect item you're selling. All of those pieces together basically make it a scalable learning experience. It helps you to kind of learn the basics of product listings, branding, good customer service habits, and then fulfillment choices without overwhelming these upfront costs. It's only 20-cent listing fee per item. So sometimes I like to go into it and say, well, how much would I pay if I went to Panera Bread for lunch today? And if I put all of that money into listings, then suddenly I'm like, wow, I've got kind of a full shop front instead of selfishly or admittedly maybe a overpriced sandwich. And I do love Panera bread, so take that with a grain of salt. But, sometimes it's just cheaper to throw turkey on a piece of wheat bread I have at home and put that money towards building my business, reinvesting in my business, really. Next, if we talk about what else is making Etsy unique relative to the other platforms, is that it does focus on creative products. It really is geared towards what it started as, was that grassroots, handmade, artisan kind of gift. And it's expanded. There are a lot of people now into digital downloads, but there have been new niches that have come out of it or been able to really kind of penetrate the market. And buyers that have these hobbies or interests that haven't made it to mass media yet or mass production from the big guys, people can still find that right personalized gift on Etsy. It's kind of the go-to for personalized gift shopping now. With all of that, there's obviously tons of stories that are being shared of people who have turned hobbies into businesses, like moms that are creating printables, people that have thrived with digital planners, people that have learned print on demand and have been making huge life-changing money without having to ever touch inventory. And all of those pieces are coming from this community, this Etsy support system. There are Facebook groups, social media, there's YouTube pages, there's podcasters popping up every other day. That's me. So there is plenty of community and support around building that business on such a well-known platform. And kind of like I referenced a little bit earlier, is that once you kind of step into Etsy, you get more comfortable and more acquainted with a lot of the technology. And yes, other platforms or other sites might have their nuances, but suddenly setting up your own website or blog might not seem as daunting just because you're more familiar with the technology, you're living in it every day, and the small pieces, if at the very least, you at least start knowing where you can turn and who you can ask, because you won't be the first or the last Etsy seller to be looking at that next stage. So yes, while I recommend Etsy as the go-to platform for starting your online business, even in 2025, of course, there are still challenges. We do have that competition. So there are sellers out there that have a very, very loyal audience base. There are sellers out there with hundreds of thousands of sales that are making the best sellers that, honestly, you're probably not going to be able to compete with, at least not in the immediate future. But there are so many ways to stand out among the competition. And there are people who have figured them out, and there are people who are opening the doors. They're not gatekeeping. They're sharing that information. That is a little bit of what I try to do. I know there are several people that I like to follow, and maybe I will do a nice nod to them in a future podcast if they are good with that. But there are a lot of people, especially a lot of women that I like to follow, who have done it and made it happen. And you just have to find the right ways to stand out, how to optimize your listings, how to create really compelling product photos, how to write to make the sale, to convert that sale. You have to really know what the fees are. Etsy has changed them over the past couple of years, and they are minimal relative to, like I said, a lot of other ways that you could try to start selling online. But for the most part, the fees are very clear. You just have to make sure to know how to account for them and how to price your products correctly, which comes with truly knowing the cost of creating your product. Every little ingredient or supply that goes into it, along with the time it takes you to put it together. All of these things could be their own podcast episodes, of course, so just something to think about. But in most cases, you're going to have a fee of some sort on almost any platform you sell on, even if it's just the Stripe processing payment fee if you're selling in person at a craft fair. Speaking of how they've changed the fees here and there, Etsy is a technology and it is a company that is trying to stay ahead. It is constantly making changes and ideally improvements, but it does mean that that's changes to the algorithm. It does mean that there's changes to pricing fee structures. Just very recently, they announced that they were going to give priority to products that have less than $6 in shipping fees. I think they just changed that in October of 2024. So you have to make sure that you stay on top of things, stay flexible, and kind of keep your eyes open as to what's changing and stay abreast of the changes to make sure you are always in line with their requirements, in good graces with Etsy, but also kind of staying ahead of the curve. Now, in the grand scheme of things, those being the challenges of a platform are really minimal relative to what they could be. And that's why I say with any endeavor, there's going to be pros and cons. But Etsy is kind of the great go-to starting points. Hopefully, just hearing a little bit of this overview gives you some sense of what you're walking into and gives you a sense of like, okay, I can get that. That's not that bad. I can walk into this like she did it. All these other people have done it. I can open an Etsy shop today and start looking on the back end and start seeing what steps I would have to take to make this real. So if you are ready to make it real, I promised you I like to talk about action items. I like to have clear takeaways. So if you're ready to open an Etsy shop, I challenge you to just go do it. Go open that Etsy shop. Go ahead and start with a small product range. Test the waters if you have things in mind or if you already make something. Just start making some listings and seeing what it feels like. As you start your shop and the more advice you hear from people, you'll hear that yes, there are plenty of sections to fill out, information, trying to brand your business, but don't worry about all that. Just think of it. Those 91 million customers are not all flooding into your shop today. Think of it as building a house or building a storefront. You buy it, you walk in, you hope customers start coming, but you can show up on Monday morning and still be stocking the shelves, especially if nobody quite knows that your business is there yet. And then you can show up on Tuesday and paint your sign, your brand colors. You can take these little steps at a time. It is not going to turn away all of your customers forever. They haven't even made it into the door yet. So don't let any of the big picture stop you from taking the small, close, easy first step today. To get you started, I actually have a free Etsy checklist that I put together probably even a couple of years ago, almost to keep my mind straight on all of the pieces I was hearing. And I'm going to drop that in the show notes below so that you can grab your own copy. And then those of you, if anybody's listening that has started an Etsy shop but hasn't really posted any items yet or hasn't really done the branding part yet, you can kind of go through this section based on where you're at and see what you need. But it's a really nice kind of clear, oh, hey, like, did I do my policies? Did I do my branding? And kind of help you at least get your mind right. But anyway, that's a freebie. I'll go ahead and drop that below. And hopefully that will help at least one of you to take that next step in your shop, wherever it is. So go ahead and look in the show notes. I will drop that link. And if you have any questions, comments, or just want to share your experience with me or give me some sense of kind of, if you're listening to this, thank you. Thank you again. Brand new podcast. I'll try to get it cleaner and more succinct each time, but no promises. And I really want to hear back from you. So tell me like who you are, what made you listen, what kept you listening, and where you are in your experience, like what you were hoping to gain from this podcast. Look, I sit at my kitchen table and just kind of talk to myself in a microphone. So I can change the topic any week I feel like, or any week you need me to. I'd love to kind of continue feeling like I'm actually talking to somebody out there. And if you have specific questions or kind of want to tell me, where you're at in Etsy or different online business, shoot me a message at hi@theprofessionalmom.com. So just hi, like hello, hi at theprofessionalmom.com, and say hi. Let me know you heard this podcast and say whatever it is that you want to share with me. I don't have a lot of Etsy entrepreneur friends, and we can all kind of use each other to boost each other up. And otherwise, until next time, I want to see you take those steps and make sure you subscribe so that each week you can hear some more pieces of the Etsy puzzle to get you to your final goal. Until next time, goodbye.